In the scenario of an alien invasion, it is at the best interest for us as humans to forever protect the legacy and to forever protect the cultures of what makes us human. We believe from the side of government that retaliating the aliens will only result in the genocide of us humans and the perpetual animosity that will forever plague what makes us human. Before I start my speech, I'm gonna be clarifying what I'm gonna do in my Prime Minister's speech. So firstly, I'm gonna give you a reasonable assumption of what this debate means, and I'm going to give you two arguments. So what does this debate reasonably assume? So firstly, this debate reasonably assumes that these aliens are smarter than us because they had the ability to detect us before we did detect them in the first place. And because they had this ability to invade us, we can also safely assume that they have the full utilization of their technology at the maximum capacity and potential that is more advanced than us. So in terms of military, they are more advanced than us in terms of military, in terms of technology, and so on and so forth. No thank you. Secondly, so we can reasonably also assume that this attack was premeditated. So this means that as a sentient species, they have chosen to invade our planet for our resources, which means that they have already studied us humans. And they've already studied the human resource compatibility between our planet and theirs. This is akin to having interventions to other countries where we can assess the general reasons why we would prioritize the intervention in the first place. And lastly, we can safely assume that as a sentient species, they would allow us to coexist with them, but at the end of the day, the quality of life is not very guaranteed in the end. So, first argument on why a war with the aliens will result in the destruction of anything that is human. But before I move on any further, are there any POIs? Okay. Okay, so I think I'll get that into my first argument on why a war with the aliens will result in the destruction of anything human, and why the assessment of that sort of idea would benefit us humans even more. So what would an ideal world look like on the side of government? So an ideal world would look like that even if of subpar life, everyone on the outside is able to stand by their families and live with them and continue finding happiness with anyone around them in this new planet. And secondly, an ideal world would be one where we would minimize the amount of pain and suffering felt by humans and minimize the amount of animosity that these aliens would propagate towards us. So, how will we lose the war in this scenario? So given that aliens are more advanced and more utilized than us, there will likely be a slaughter of all our existence as humans. So soldiers will be eliminated, humans would also be eliminated in the process because it's the same thing. So this means that the soldiers would then get brutally killed and go through immense amounts of pain and trauma. This can coexist with humans as well. So the result to this is that there is a large animosity of the aliens towards us, the strong hostility that can exist. No thank you. So the second harm is that in order to end the war faster, aliens will then resort into fear-mongering or implementing fear tactics. So aliens will resort to bombing schools. They will resort to bombing hotels or homes where people live in. No thank you. They will take soldiers from us and torture them with their means or with their advancements and technology really inhumanely. So these are all horrific incidences that can scar people for the long term, and that is what we don't want from the very long term. And thirdly, so the third harm would be, now, even if we surrender after the war, if there is a scenario that we did fight the war, no thank you, they will simply just kill us off because we become the liability because we tried to kill off their soldiers in the first place. So there is no interest for them to protect us in the first place. Also, so the conclusion to this first argument is that firstly, so many more children that otherwise would have grown up to live up to subpar lives would then go through immense pain and suffering under their side. So they have to prove how intrinsically that humans will survive this type of alien invasion. No thank you. And secondly, that this idea on how humans can never win the war because we think that because these aliens are already more technologically advanced than us, then there is no fair level or fair ground in which we can fight on. So second argument, on why do we continue the legacy and continue the cultures of the human race and the cultures of the human race. So First of all, what are we willing to trade off from the side of government? We are willing to trade off that in your world, when the entire human race is murdered and is murdered and has gone extinct, it is the very end of anything that was human. And all of our cultures that we've worked for years and years on will have simply disappeared. Moreover, the way it was taken from us was that we were forced to look by at the killings, and we were forced to look at how unfair the alien invasion was to us. We are willing to trade off, no thank you, a subpar life if it means that we get to keep the cultures that we have worked for years and the legacy that we have, the legacy that has been intrinsically important to the existence of the human race. So, how will society look past or post-assimilation process in this new planet? So we have to concede, no thank you, that it may not be the best, but at least we will be completely unified in this period of time post-assimilation. The point at which all of our privilege, so all of our privilege is basically non-existent in this new planet. So this means that we don't have a social status anymore, and there is no form of discrimination occurring in this new planet. So because we then have to conform to this new privileged class that is the alien race. So the distinction is that now we are now a more unified human race peacefully compared to us unifying and getting murdered under their scenario. So we on the outside have actual change. Now we'll have everyone together to preserve and to rebuild the culture and legacy, because now we've gotten more stronger communities in the long term, and we have support structures that can support us from the very get-go. This results into less discrimination when we're aware that there are issues bigger than us humans. There are issues that concern our well-being in this new planet. So individuals that are victimized before now have access to equal lives in this new planet. So we think that it is a fair, reasonable argument to assume so. So we think at the very get-go, it is the very best interest of us as humans to preserve our culture and legacy. We've never been proud to propose.
Must I use the mic though? Okay. 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 What side opposition really stands for today is that we want to preserve human dignity, the common cause of humanity, to make sure that even if we die with the fact, knowing that we have upheld what we have always upheld through the years and centuries. So what is our opposition going to do today? Firstly, we're going to try diplomacy. We're going to try to make sure that we negotiate with the aliens to come with a peace agreement. But if this doesn't work out, what we'll do is that we're going to fight back. Even if, let's say, we're going to be outnumbered, we make sure that we fight back to the very end. So what happens is that we're going to try to make sure we salvage humanity and dignity, and because we believe that the kind of trade-offs and the kind of uncertainty that they have already considered on their side is not worth it. It's not a worthwhile concept, not a worthwhile trade-off. So one main point of that, right? We think that ultimately, the aliens have a certain kind of vested interest to make sure that we are still alive. No, thank you, sir. Simply because we pose a certain kind of utility, which is like kind of why they are invading us in the first place, right? But not only so, we think that we have already seen through history the kind of smaller countries who are able to fight back towards bigger countries. For example, Yugoslavia and the USSR. How Japan was able to defeat China within the Japanese occupation. And we think that as long as we make sure that we are bonded as an entire common humanity, a common human race, we think that no, thank you, sir. At least we have a chance to fight against the aliens, right? And we'd like to point out the fact that they've really made a concession in their first speaker that there's a lot of grey area as to the futures of humans, and I'm going to expand onto this within my substantive. But never mind, moving on to my rebuttal first. So who best preserves the quality of life? We think that they've already said that they've already considered that humans' futures are uncertain, but there's one thing that we can be sure about. We are definitely sure that humanity will definitely be compromised, right? We think that ultimately what actually makes a human, and what ultimately makes someone no, thank you, sir. What makes a human's life so purposeful and so important is simply because we're able to uphold the ideals of humanity. So exactly what are the ideals of humanity, right? I'll be explaining this in my substantive, but this ultimately means choice, the fact that we're not a homogeneous race, we're heterogeneous, we actually respect diversity, and the kind of moral constructs and the kind of social constructs that we live by that ultimately make us human. But not only so, right, they've already considered to us that these aliens have no vested interest to keep us, as we are ultimately liabilities. And if let's say this said alien planet is really going to, no thank you sir, going to fail in the future, or let's say if there's anything that's going to happen to that planet, we have to know that we are going to be the first ones to get killed anyway. But we think that not only so, we rather, what they came out to tell us is that, oh, there's going to be extinction of the human race, and I've already proven to you how this might not always be true. But even if, let's say, extinction is going to happen, if we really said that we'd rather die than compromise on humanity. And we see that humans are able to make sure that they make a very huge stand, let's say, express themselves through they're able to express themselves well, even if death, right? For example, we see the reason why Arab Springs even came out is because a man set himself on fire, and we see this kind of like suicides or like female suicides to protest against gang rape. We think that all this are like shows that how humans are willing to fight for the kind of cause that they are willing that they want to uphold. No, thank you, sir. But not only so, right? We think that when we are forced to assimilate, ultimately humanity is being compromised. And as much as they want to say that, oh, your descendants are able to like continue humanity in an alien planet, not exactly right. The idea of assimilation is that you actually fit to the kind of social norms that they have, you fit to the kind of moral metrics and constructs that they have, and we don't really think that humanity can be preserved in this case. So if they're going to tell us about the idea of humanity being lost, we think that humanity is being lost on both sides, only that we lose it with more dignity, with the fact that we know that we fought for something that we wanted to protect so well. But not only so, right, we think the idea of, no thank you sir, we think the idea of no discrimination on their side, or like how you have a better quality of life because there's no discrimination, is inherently false, right? We think that, I'll be explaining how like this is false in my substantive, but not only so, we think that the idea of what they have tried to boil down to us is that they're taking all the kind of diverse qualities of humans and putting it into one negative lens of, oh, there's going to be less like current discrimination in status quo, and therefore we have to wipe it out. We think that the kind of respect that we give diversity, the way that we respect it and celebrate it, is something that we have to look into as well. So now moving on quickly to my substantive, no thank you, about firstly on how aliens are really like. So we think that they are hostile in this situation. They've already shown that they don't want to have peace agreements, they want to invade us instead, and we can also see that from there that likewise they want something from us simply because they wanted to have an agreement where they get our resources. But not only so, right, we think that's extremely dangerous in this situation because, as what government has already said, we don't really know about them, they know more about us. But likewise, we think that it's very unpredictable in this situation. So why so? Firstly, because they've already proven to be hostile. This doesn't necessarily mean they uphold the peace agreements, especially since, as what my speaker has already POI'd, they're smarter than us, they're likely to be able to trick us, especially since there's no vested interest for them to actually assimilate us into their society. But not only so, right, there's no check and balance because we're in an entirely foreign land. What makes you think that they're really going to uphold that kind of moral metric, this kind of agreement that they've already stated? But not only so, we're extremely vulnerable and we're at their mercy, where they can always ask us for more concessions if we actually allow this concession to allow this trade agreement to already be made. But not only so, right, we think that there's a chance that they won't uphold their bargain. No, thank you. But even if, let's say, they do uphold their bargain, firstly, two ideas. Firstly, a war of slavery, right? Ultimately, they can bring us there and so-called assimilate us, give us jobs, but they're always going to be subpar. They're never going to look at us the same way. But likewise, we think that they have actually no vested interest to already treat us well in the present situation, but give us the basics like food and water, something that we can sustain on. But not only so, they've already taken away our resources. We don't see how we pose any more utility to them within their society. But likewise, right, on their terms, since we have already given up their resources, we have already so-called surrendered the way in the Japanese occupation, you sign away the surrender of like how the Japanese sign away their surrender. So ultimately, we're simply puppets to them. But not only so, right, we think it's very hard for us to assimilate, especially since they have no respect nor do they actually understand the way humans work. Which is my second substantive on how we lose common humanity. So exactly what makes us human, right? Firstly, unique identity. Secondly, on our moral metric, and thirdly, on our ability to choose. So unique identity in the idea that we are not homogeneous, we understand we have differences, and this is where I rebut the idea of discrimination, where actually it's not so much about discrimination, right? Let's look at on the idea of how we are able to have cross-cultural exchanges and so on and so forth. But even if, let's say, we're going to talk about how there's going to be less discrimination, we don't really think so, because aliens simply see us as an entire human bulk. They're going to discriminate against us likewise, and they aren't able to actually understand the nuances. For example, they're just going to kill off our disabled, make the gays procreate, or let's say even make Muslims eat pork, right? fight. And likewise, we think that in this situation, they're unable to understand our morality metric, for example, the way we have a judicial system, the way we set up courts, and how we say like, thou shalt not kill. We think that in this situation, we ultimately lose the essence of humanity in this situation. And likewise, the ability to choose, for example, the way we get to make choices within our society, simply because we have a government, simply because we respect each other, which is something we are unable to ascertain on, in the alien world. So with all I've said, please go aside opposition.
Prop fiat might not guarantee us a lot of things, but one of the few things that it does is that it guarantees us that humans are allowed to assimilate into this alien species. It guarantees us that we're allowed to live in their planet, live within their premises, coexist with their species. The only thing that we cannot define or we cannot fiat in this debate is the type of interaction that happens with that existence. Opposition cannot tell you that the alien species will kill us off the point at which we land in their planet. Because if that were true, then there would be no debate to happen today. So given that, the analysis needs to be on the quality of life, excluding the possibility of death, versus the inevitable death, which we think side opposition could not challenge. So I'm going to make three rebuttals before moving on to one argument. Firstly, can we fight back? Because they try to tell us that they're smarter, they're stronger, they have more technological advancements, but we can still fight back. You know why? Because smaller countries fought bigger countries in the past. And I'm going to tell you why this is completely different. It is a different playing field altogether. If you listen to Daniel's speech, there were 3 reasons why all the technological advancements that they had did not apply to humans. Even within your wars, there was still a relatively equal playing field in terms of artillery, in terms of strategy. Even if we were outnumbered, we were still using the same rockets, we were still using the same firepower. But even if that was not true, and we could still fight back to some extent, I'm going to give you 3 more reasons. Firstly, humans have always pacified our ability to fight wars. Our understanding of humanity limited our research and expansion into evolving our ability to create mass destruction. Your Geneva Convention discontinued the research into cluster bomb. It discontinued the research into anti-landmines. Our pacification of our army force will reduce our preparation in fighting your alien force inevitably. Because all these while, we have tried to fight wars in a humane manner. We've tried to fight wars by killing humans in the best manner possible, by keeping a moral conscience within them. But these aliens don't have to conform. They didn't limit their technological advancements. They continued going until they found our planet to invade us on. Secondly, they have a replenishable army and replenishable resources. They had the ability to send their people here. They had the ability to come from a planet that could inhibit it as well. Have a seat. But they also chose to send a dispensable army, which assumes as a planet they could possibly have more individuals to fight. In a war of attrition, we think it's reasonable to assume that they are going to win this war of attrition. But thirdly, if this wasn't enough, animosity breeds irrationality. Even within the human race, this side of the house cannot fiat that individuals are going to fight together, that everyone is going to go out to this war and just fight the aliens. Because some people under your paradigm protect their riches, some people create bunkers to fight the alien race, some people just spend as much as they want and just come to the end of their human civilization, and all these people won't be concentrated in the fight against the alien race, which you cannot guarantee under your paradigm. Even if we were strong enough, some people just opt out of the fight entirely and act in self-preservation and selfishness, and the lack of unification of humanity will inevitably be our demise. Have a seat. Lastly, will they uphold their policy in this debate, right? So will they uphold the promise that they have made us? So firstly, I've told you this debate assumes that they can, but they went further. They said they'll trick us into conceding into some kind of agreement that reduces our freedoms and our ability to be who we are. If they were so smart as to trick our understanding and our conscious minds into making a deal which we couldn't opt out of, they would also be as so smart as to detecting human weaknesses, as to engaging in some form of attacks that we cannot premeditate or map out of our circumstances. If the understanding this debate is accepted that they are smarter as a species, they are also able to identify our weaknesses as human human beings. I'm going to make the second point of rebuttal now. Will they violate our culture? Will they force individuals to conform? Because their characterization, and this was really late in, they told us that it'll force people out of their lives, they'll make Muslims eat pork, they'll make other individuals conform to lifestyle choices that they didn't want to. I think for a vast majority of circumstances, even if this happens in unlikely circumstance, it is still preferable. Because under your paradigm, there is still the gore and the pain that people have to go through till that point. We think that at that point in time, in that point of animosity, people can choose. People can choose whether they want to get rid of anything that they thought they were at that point and just continue to be this blank human being that continues to eat pork and continues to do whatever that alien tells them to do on that survival, or they can choose to die in that species, but that's not our burden in today's debate. If they think that that life is not worth living in that planet, they can opt out of it completely. Our burden is to guarantee individuals that opportunity to get there. So what's my argument? Why is a life that it's subpar life preferable to the elimination of our existence? Sure.
So on your end, you force people to opt in, not unwillingly, into a system, and the alternative for them is death. On our end, we at least provide people with a chance for survival. We provide people with fighting chances, a chance at a dignified existence.
So this is the difference. Under our paradigm, we give them a life versus your paradigm's death. But if they go to this planet and they self-realize that that life is no better than the death they could possibly adhere to, that is a choice that the person can make individually. If that is not a life worth living at that point in time, we believe in an ability to opt out of it, right? So firstly, why is a subpar life preferable? I cannot guarantee a great life for the individuals here, freedom and autonomy, but we think that there's a possibility for fair treatment. Because sentience is a conscious ability to understand what you are doing, and we think it's reasonable to assume that these individuals feel emotions and pain as well, because they were conscious of invasion, they were conscious of self-preservation, and they were conscious of progression of their own species. We think barriers in understanding doesn't limit our ability to coexist. If that was true, we would have just exploited animals completely. But we came to a point of understanding, and we did come to a point of fair treatment, because as a superior civilization, we tried to mitigate the pain and sufferings of other civilizations, because we felt guilt, we felt pain, and we didn't want other individuals to feel that way as well. I really think it's important to recognize. But even if we couldn't guarantee a meaningful life, even if people were just placed in these boxes or jail cells, or they were forced to forced labor under your paradigm for this alien species, I still think it's better. Two reasons why. Firstly, humans might change in location, but human norms and relationships don't change under our paradigm. Even if you're forced to a subpar job, if you're forced to a subpar area, at least you go there with your family. And the existence of these connections allow people to be happy wherever they are, wherever you bring your friends, wherever you bring your families, wherever you bring anything that you had in terms of meaning, still allows you to access that same form of meaning there. This is contrasted to your paradigm, where you are forced to witness aliens murdering your family members, murdering everything you thought you stood for, till that point of demise for yourself. But secondly, even in its worst form, we think it's preferable to die in a peaceful manner. Through all the pains and suffering that you're going to live there, we can still guarantee life till your ultimate demise. They can't guarantee life, they can't guarantee a humane death, they can't guarantee anything.
Two main points of contention for today. Firstly on survival, secondly on humanity. So firstly on survival, they came out to tell us that it's not fair for us to challenge the fact that these aliens might actually back out of the treaty. They say that it's not fair for us to challenge that there's actually a chance for humans to be completely massacred the moment aliens got the resources, right? We don't think this is necessarily true. We think it's perfectly fine for our burden opposition to prove why there's actually a risk and a doubt within their side, to prove a risk and doubt within their side that humans are going to be treated aren't going to treat it fairly, especially since their first speaker already conceded that aliens have no incentive to let human lives. There's no reason as to why there's the absolute guarantee that aliens themselves will uphold the treaty and the so-called exchange, negotiations between humans and aliens, right? And with that, two main rebuttals as to why is it we think that there is actually a chance for survival, and that completely surrendering is not the worst, is not alternative that humans should have to take up. So firstly, we think that there is the chance that humans can fight back, right? Our first speaker already told you how the fact that aliens actually want our resources means that there are certain things within the earth, certain resources which they can utilize, which they don't have, which they can actually use towards their benefit, right? And we think that, like, insofar that there is something that we can use to fight back, we think there's always a chance of us, like, no thank you, sir. There's always a chance for us to, like, survive. That we give you examples of how, like, traditionally there have been smaller countries who managed to overpower larger countries, right? We give you an example of how, like, Yugoslavia, like, refused to, like, to join the Warsaw Pact, even though there's a chance that USSR might invade them and completely ruin them, but they still survive. We told you about how, like, Japan actually managed to defeat China in, like, World War I. We think there are always a chance, and there's always, like, there's no certainty that you will always die if you fight back. And as long as this, like, chance and, like, slight certainty of survival exists, we think that we are willing to fight. But secondly, they come in to tell us that there's also no thank you, sir, that, like, aliens don't adhere to, like, the Geneva Convention, therefore they'll plead dirty. Firstly, we think this is all the more reason why we have to maintain humanity, right? It's simply because they don't. We think there's absolutely no reason why they would, like, why they would like respect human life, why they would treat us fairly, as the second speaker came out to say. And now this brings me on to my second contention on humanity. So, firstly, are we going to be treated fairly? So we don't think, like, opposition, like, really within the opposition was kind of hypocritical when they said that there's a guarantee that, like, that aliens will be able to treat them fairly, right? That even if you cannot guarantee, like, the quality of your life, there's still a chance that you might be treated fairly. No, thank you, sir. We don't think this is entirely the case. Firstly, we tell you, right, that there is no like, incentive for aliens to ensure that we are treated fairly. Lydia came up to tell us about how the moment that you are no, thank you, sir. The moment you exist as an entire human species, as a bulk of, like, 1 billion, 2 billion people, there is no reason why is it, like, aliens would choose to recognize the differences, the nuances within our society. They have no concept of religion. They have no concept of gender or sexuality. What does this mean? What does this mean under that paradigm, right? It means that for all we know, we could be used as brute mass. We could be used, and they could, like, force, like, gay people to, like, impregnate, like, women or something. No, thank you, sir. They could, like, force they could like, kill off all mentally disabled people because they don't see any utility towards them. We think that they can do things like a mass killing of, like, children because they don't think that children are worth keeping alive, right? No, thank you, sir. And we think that therefore this completely, like, destroys whatever they said about how the fact that you're able to stay with your family is worth living, because we think that there's no guarantee that you can stay with your family. We think there's a much higher chance that you're going to be killed, you're going to be systematically and discriminated against, but there's no reason to believe, no thank you, sir, that their so-called version of assimilation is that you get jobs. It may be really, really poor jobs, but you still get jobs and you still get cages. No, we tell you that the moment, like, aliens see us as a bulk of people, it is much more likely, hold on a minute, sir, that they treat us like animals and nothing more. Before I continue, yes.
If you survive this invasion in any possible way, your Earth would be in a state of animosity. A majority of the resources would have been depleted in fighting this alien invasion. A lot of people would have died in a gruesome manner that many people cannot recover from. Why is Earth still worth living in?
Point, sir, I'm going to tell you that at the very least, this, like, small group of people is going to die retaining the humanity and retaining the lives which they choose to live. And that even if, like, everyone else dies, I'm going to tell you later on why is it death is worth it. But now continuing on, like, fair treatment, right? So secondly, we tell you that there's no point in living in their paradigm of this, like, super degrading and super undignified world, right? No, thank you, sir. We think it's much preferable. We draw a parallel to how, like, Jews would much rather, like, die than, like, live under the regime of Hitler, right? Knowing that their right to religion, knowing that their families and that, like, people who don't serve, like, the utility of Hitler is going to be killed off. We tell you, right, that the quality of life is everything to humanity, because as religious already told you, two things: one, morality, and two, choice. The moment we lose these things, the moment we, like, forsake our morality and are forced to, like, adhere to whatever the aliens decide, and we are forced to, like, to be separated from our families, to be forced to like, give up whatever personal, whatever, like, spiritual decisions we have made. We think that there's no point to life. That at the very least, under their side, even though they say things like, no thank you, sir, we're going to, like, shred our humanity, we're going to be, like, live an extremely gruesome death after fighting a war, we tell you that this is what war is all about, right? If there is no point in, like, living a war, then there is no reason why wars would happen in the first place, because countries think that there is something that is worth going to war for. No thank you, sir. So why is it now that humanity is worth fighting for, and why is it we will be willing to die, right? Firstly, because we tell you that the quality of life can never be guaranteed, that even if there is, like, the quality of life can never be guaranteed, it's much more likely that it's going to be severely compromised, that humans are going to be degraded, are going to live undignified lives. And therefore, but secondly, we also tell you that, as long as we have known, no thank you, sir, humans have always been willing to sacrifice sacrifice their lives for what they believe is right. We tell you about how like indigenous cultures, they choose to starve themselves instead of like giving in to like white imperialists, right? We tell you about how like environmentalists choose to set themselves on fire just to make a statement that like the environment is something that is worth fighting for. And we think that's like precisely what is so special and so important about humanity, because we have the ability to make decisions, because we know there are certain moral standards that we adhere to, and these are moral standards that we are willing to fight for. And therefore, at the very most, as seeing as have already proven to you that there is a chance that humans may survive this war, we think that there's absolutely no reason why is it you will willingly choose to surrender, especially considering like it means that aliens are much more likely to press you for concessions. First they ask you for resources, now they can ask you for your firstborns or something, and they have nothing that like there's nothing that we humans can do. We are utterly vulnerable. The moment we give our technology, our weapons, our food, and our water, everything we have is dictated by aliens. And therefore we think that because like humanity is worth fighting for, because we would rather die than live in a world in which we are degraded and treated as nothing but animals, I'm extremely proud to oppose.
Alright, thank you very much for the speech. I call upon the next speaker, the whip speaker of the
In the face of absolute pain and suffering, a compromise of socially constructed morals may be the right thing to do if that reduces the amount of people who are harmed, killed, or tortured. We are fine with giving up this earth if we take with us what matters in preserving it, the cultures of the human race and the individuals that made it mean something. I'm going to ask a number of questions in my whip speech to deal with the issues coming from team opposition. So the first question, can we fight back? Now the alternative from them was, if there are things important in our world, we will use all of our resources to fight back against the aliens. Well, here's the problem. The point at which the thing most important to the aliens are at risk by the inhabitants of that planet, that's when they're going to amp up on fastening the genocide of all of your individuals so they can secure the resources that they think are most important. So if they know you're going to use all the oil to kill them, they just make sure there are no more humans to use any of that oil. So if anything, you rush the process of aliens trying to take out every last single human being in the entire world, the point at which you make it a priority for them to do so. But even if you may be able to use more resources, we think that more people in your world will still die. And this means there's more pain and there's more suffering. So in that fight, the comparison would have been we could have at least gone to another world and lived a subpar life, but we wouldn't have had to die. We would still be able to choose. We would still be able to be with our societies and our communities, comparing to us being alone in a battlefield bleeding out. But here's the distinction, right? Even in your best case scenario, here's why you cannot come back. Because if your alternative was to use all our resources, this is a global war. So the point in which you exhaust every resource in your world to fight off an army that is replenishable and can always go back and come back at another time, we think your world is the worst off place. Because now you've exhausted your minerals, you've lost a lot of your soldiers, your people are really upset, and society is tearing itself apart because so many people have died in this scenario. We think it's going to be that much more harder for you to come back to any form of human dignity that you would have known as before. Because people are sad, people are scared, and you cannot defend yourself when they do come back. No, thank you. But what about the principle? Fight the fight. So sure, it may be important to fight the fight in the face of extreme evil. But if more people suffer, we think you are being complicit in the perpetuation of more evil. The point at which more orphanages are blown up, the point at which more soldiers are tortured, that is when people actually do suffer, and that is when evil is a principle that you're defending. But the second question, no thank you. Will there be discrimination? Because what they want to do is, they said that they're going to exploit us, the point at which we get to that planet. Well, why would they do so? Because the point at which we are assimilated into that planet and we're part of that society, the point at which they exploit us and we do try to fight back, that's when their citizens can also be hurt as well, comparatively to us fighting back at home, where the only people who are going to be hurt are their soldiers already consented anyway. So when we're part of that culture and part of that society, they'll have a higher imperative to maintain that peace, because there are more civilians in their side that could get hurt. But even if we think it's more preferable if aliens discriminate us rather than humans, because we don't relate to these aliens, but what we relate to are humans. And what's going to exist post-assimilation are stronger communities where people no longer have social statuses, where we see each other as individuals who are the most responsible in continuing that legacy. And if anything, all the minorities before that would have been discriminated are now free of that discrimination and free of that past. It's a blank slate, and people are more likely to come together in this instance. We think for the individuals that may be forced to eat pork, that's better. If we see the aliens doing this, this gives us more reason to want to come together as a community, because we're more able to empathize with them. If anything, we can put this akin to slavery, the point at which the African Americans came together as a community and then fought back against the structural discrimination that the whites imposed upon them. That all happened the point at which the whites put more forms of discrimination that they couldn't escape from. So if anything, you galvanize that change even faster. But what about if you remove those without utility? We think the harms are much worse when aliens resort to other tactics to remove those without utility. So in your world, we think, in our world, maybe the handicapped will die, but in your world, children, mothers, and fathers will also die. So on a scale, we think the amount of people that are going to be hurt by the fear and the power that aliens have increased, the point at which they go to war at us, but we think it's preferable to mass genocide. So at least we have more people alive. But before that, any POS? Okay, so the third question, in which world can we uphold human dignity? And here's why we think that even if it's the most subpar life, it's the best alternative. Because the first thing I'll say is, why you worsen the quality of life for humans? In the fight for survival, coming to the end of days, we think society is going to tear each other apart in preparation for doomsday. When you know that you cannot win this war, we don't think there'll be any need to respect the laws anymore. We don't think there'll be any need to want to feel safe anymore. Instead, you know and you will contemplate the guilt that everything you've learned is going to come to an end, and there's nothing you can do to stop that. If anything, the amount of pain and suffering that these people go through those end days is going to be so intense that any subpar life they would have lived in your world can't match that. The dignity that they would have felt is completely lost, because they do get killed and they do get betrayed by their own fellow humans. This is when they do believe that there is no comeback for the human race, and that's when you will see individuals giving up all these weird mystical principles of dignity because they only care about their safety. That's when you will actually see people tearing each other apart. But we think the comparative is, at least when we are rational and not under duress, that's when you're more likely to maintain dignity, because you aren't being influenced by any immediate threat to hurt other individuals for your own survival. We also say that will these aliens uphold their bargain? We think maybe not. But a subpar life is better than torture. We think in your world you restrict the access that people have to their family and happiness, and that's when it's a lot harder for these individuals to be able to find any form of happiness in the life that they're having then and there. So it's fine. We're okay with people going to these alien worlds and maybe being treated as slaves, as long as the human dignity that they knew existed isn't taken away right before their very eyes when they were back at home. Because when they were back at home and they did see their friends turn on each other, that's when you will never be able to have any form of assimilation with each other again. When society does get out of the war, they won't be able to see each other as brothers and sisters. They'll see each other as murderers and rapists who took advantage of a situation where everyone was vulnerable. That's when you will have more people segregating. That's when you have society less able to integrate, because they are more afraid of each other and not afraid of the oppressor. And that's the alternative. We would rather them be afraid of the aliens when they get to that planet and then fight back for more equal rights, than them be afraid of themselves and fight more to make sure that less people are able to access privileges, less people are able to access resources, because these are the people that don't deserve them. We would rather the people be united as a people, regardless of whether that's in another planet or if that's on Earth. Because the most important thing to our planet isn't the planet itself, it's the cultures that brought our people to that point, the point at which we can call each other humans and friends. And that culture is a legacy that can only be created when there are people working on it. We can work on those cultures when we are alive, we can choose when we are alive, but we cannot when we are scared and when we are dead.
All right, thank you very much for the speech. I'd like to call upon the last substantive speaker of our setup to the speech here.
you. Let's be clear. In this debate, deaths are going to occur on both sides of the house. The difference here is that on side proposition, some deaths happen, or even if we can see that a lot of deaths will happen, at least we allow for a chance for people to fight for a dignified, meaningful existence. On the other hand, opposition completely strips these people of their rights and completely strips these people of a chance to actually live and exercise a life of meaningful, dignified existence. And we think that's horrible. What op does is that they subject humans to the alien's conception of morality, that they subject humans to a lifetime of torture, which my both first and second speakers have told you that a lifetime of torture is less desirable as compared to immediate death, or death that is going to occur with you dying in a dignified way. So opposition today only wanted to engage us on the assumption that death is more severe than a lifetime of torture, and not once in this debate have they proven to us with realistic characterization why a lifetime of torture is necessarily going to be less bad as compared to the dignified death that's going to happen on our side. I'm going to elucidate this in 2 points of contention for the debate. No, thank you, sir. Firstly, what will aliens do, and therefore, what is in humans' best interest to act? Secondly, whether or not living a dignified existence is more important than survival. On my first point of contention, what aliens will do that and what is in humans' best interest. We told you on our side of the house that what their side advocates is something akin to slavery. That at the point to which humans sign this contractual agreement and agree to consign all of their resources, give up all their resources to the alien kind, that they have no idea how the future is going to pan out. We tell you that this is so dangerous at the point to which they characterize themselves and they consider themselves that these aliens are much smarter than us and will come up with terms of agreement that will completely sidestep any sort of fears like the humans even have in the first place. And we tell you because of that, the humans will be completely blindsided once they give up all of their resources and walk into a planet completely vulnerable and open to attack. They told you, like this is a weird characterization. No, thank you, sir. That aliens have emotions and are sensible enough because of the fact that they invaded and therefore want self-preservation. We tell you that it's precisely because of the fact that they invaded and want self-preservation that the first and foremost instinct on their mind is that of self-survival. That because of the fact that they prioritize efficiency and survival of their own kind, that they will not hesitate to remove the barriers that exist towards their survival. Just as how they clearly did not respect the barriers of humans, like that humans place at the point to which they decided to invade. No, thank you, sir. We think this is intuitive enough to realize, therefore, like what my first and second speakers told you, that humans will be the first to be sacrificed on their side of the house. That at the point to which they realize that the economic efficiency is being corrupted, or at the point to which one human decides to step up and rail against the sort of alien system that has been imposed on them, which we tell you is extremely likely is going to happen, then we tell you that on their side, they're going to ensure that humans are the first to be sacrificed, to ensure that you set a precedence for the rest of the human race to shut up in future events. They tell the human race that they cannot do anything about it. They told us on our side that, and this brings me to my second point of contention, on whether or not living a dignified existence is more important than survival. Let me talk to you about survival under a unified existence, which they claim will happen. Firstly, I'm going to talk to you about why assimilation is not going to happen and why unity is not going to exist on their end. My first two speakers told you about how, no thank you, sir, about how people, only when they are put at their wit's end and determined to fight a common united enemy, when they are fighting to the end on our side, is only when people are going to come together. And we do this the best in opposition. We best allow for unity of the humankind on the side of opposition. No, thank you, sir. On their side, any sort of dissent, and let's be clear here, the benefits that they talk about are apparently going to exist, that humans are going to form some kind of community or support network, are not going to exist. Because why would aliens have any incentive to allow these kinds of things to happen? At the point to which you realize that humans are impeding their sort of progress by coming together and forming support networks, they'll just do something extremely simple, climb down on them. And at this point in time, humans will be so defenseless because they will have given up all their resources and have no means of fighting back. Before I carry on, yes, sir.
If people continue to fight and realize they cannot win, isn't that when they're going to react to the absurdity of the situation and have your society break down to those who are desperate and just looking for safety?
Well, we tell you here on our side that it's much better, and I don't understand why side proposition doesn't seem to understand this, right? That what we advocate on side opposition is that we would rather you die a dignified death as opposed to you continuing to live in a lifetime of torture when your life could be potentially taken away at any point in time, because the aliens can just carve it out and carve it out as something can just create their own constitution which humans will have to abide by and say that and abuse that system, right? And say that humans will die because of the fact that they did this and this is deemed immoral in our system. And therefore it's so easy for the aliens to exploit that sort of constitution, exploit that sort of legal system, and then abuse the sort of system. But at this point that humans will be completely defenseless against this. They also wanted to talk about minorities and how they best help them on their side. But we tell you that only when you fight to the end, that's when you eliminate differences and come together to even fight in the first place, right? That humans are not caring about whether or not you're gay if you're going to be together with them in a coalition fighting the aliens, and that's where we're going to achieve unity. No, thank you, sir. They also talk to you, we also talk to you about how, this brings me to the second point, about how even if we ensure that unity is going to be present under their model, that unity is absolutely abhorrent, because it means that people are consenting, that humans are consenting and obeying every single thing that aliens instruct. And my first two speakers already talked to you enough, no thank you, sir, about how aliens are a completely different species and we have completely different conceptions of morality according to their own paradigms, which are not going to be in line with that of humans. We tell you that the point to which humans are forced to obey everything, and humans are unified in obeying everything that they say, that they essentially become puppets of a sort of world in which alien hegemony exists. Because we acknowledge that no matter how much you indoctrinate people with and tell people that their life is good because of news and things like that, but people are going to realize and people are going to recognize and be cognizant of the fact that their moralities are not being abided to by the aliens. They're going to be cognizant of the fact that all their social cultures, which they assume is excellent on their side, by the aliens, that I've already proven in my speech and in the earlier speeches, that aliens have no incentive to preserve the sort of cultures on their end. We tell you that they're going to bring about irreversible harms on their side at a point to which you allow aliens to completely strip humans of their rights. And because of the fact that we ensure a chance of survival on our end, because of the fact that we best ensure the preservation of human culture and advocation of human dignity in the kind of existence that we can at least ensure that there's a chance of on our end, because we think that dying a meaningful death and dying a dignified death is still more important than a lifetime of torture that the side of proposition is somehow willing to subject humans to. I'm so proud to oppose.
Right, thank you very much for the speech. I call upon the opposition advisor.
The name is written Natalie Poe, but it's me. First speaker.
You want it?
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So let's paint out two worlds today, the world of government and the world of opposition. So let's look at how government is actually going to work. What happens is that the people on government side is willing to let humanity go to waste. Years and years, centuries and centuries of civilization will all go down to the one time where they actually told the aliens, forget it, we'll just surrender. We're just going to give you all the resources, everything that we have accumulated over the years, right? All the culture that we have, everything else, we're just going to end up assimilating like you. What happens outside government is that many of those people who never wanted to assimilate will end up having to go with the aliens anyway, with the nagging thought through their minds, through the rest of their lives, no matter however short it is, that perhaps I had a chance to rebel against it, but I never could. So what happens on government side? Two simple ideas. Firstly, they assimilate, or secondly, once they reach there, they get tricked and they die. So what happens when they reach alien land and they have to so-called assimilate? What happens is that aliens, as we've already painted out, might not actually even respect the idea of human relations, human families, the idea of human morals. You get separated from your family, you get torn apart, your morals completely disrespected, the kind of cultures that you have completely gone. What happens is that you're treated as a subpar civilian, as what they've already painted out to you. The idea of slavery, the fact that you live half a life only. No, there's actually no point in safety in the first place when there's nothing for you to protect anymore. We see there's absolutely no point in the lives of humans in this situation, where you get systemic discrimination, not as individual groups of people, but rather as an entire human cohort. And the fact that you want to try to assimilate within them is never going to be possible, because ultimately you look different, the way you are treated is different, the kind of thinking that you have is ultimately different, right? And likewise, every day, all these people just live thinking that perhaps I had a chance to go back, but I could never do it once again. But likewise, when years down the road, so when they finally realize that the aliens have finally realized that humans are ultimately liabilities, when you no longer have the kind of utility that they once posed when they had resources within Earth, they die. They get pushed away. They get killed simply because they're no longer useful. Or like what Cheyenne said, maybe the humans end up having a revolution. They try to push them away, and ultimately, when you're no longer the kind of meek humans that you once were, you're just gone. So ultimately, what happens on their side is that they end up losing humanity, and they end up losing human lives, only at different times. And they may tell you that the deaths are ultimately when the aliens finally kill them, but we'll tell you that the deaths are the day where they step onto alien land and they lose humanity. So what happens on our side? We think that ultimately, yes, our end goal may not exactly be survival, it's actually humanity. We think that on the worst scenario, everyone dies. On our better scenario, people fight back. And we think that people ultimately will fight back. People come together in the light where they think that, okay, I get to fight for a cause that I love, with the people that I love, knowing that even if I die in the presence of these people that I know have always supported me, for a land that I know has always supported me as well. We think that, and what happens is that even if they die, they know that they've died with honor, died with something that they always wanted to preserve. And even if they live, right, even if, let's say, we take us on our worst scenario, where there's only 5 people left on Earth, where perhaps they hate each other to their guts, they just don't see eye to eye. But ultimately, there's something to build upon. They have a common humanity in a place where humanity is respected, where humanity has always been birthed in the first place, and perhaps even died. At least we know that humanity will be respected. To its very last core, these people will build civilization once again. So ultimately, what happens on our side, right? Yes, on both sides, perhaps deaths will occur. Many deaths will occur. We think that ultimately what we respect is death before the loss of honor. We think that both on government's best and on our worst, humanity dies on the same day, but ultimately we die with no regrets. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our final speaker, the government replies speaker.
3 questions in this speech. Firstly, what happens when we fight? Secondly, what happens with conformity? And thirdly, is a subpar life really not preferable? Firstly, what happens when we fight? We gave you numerous reasons for human loss to be evident. We told you there was a lack of unification, which we think that they chose to ignore throughout this speech. We told you premeditation and a knowledge of humanity makes us systematically disadvantaged. We told you humans are unprepared for this invasion. Humans don't have the resources. We pacified ourselves. These were all logical reasonings that ended up breaking their examples and correlation towards wars in our planet between Yugoslavia and Japan and an inevitable alien invasion. Here's where I tell you, the response from side opposition cannot be, and it cannot be, there's a slight possibility of survival without an analysis and reasoning as to why that slight possibility is real. Because if we're taking into consideration slight possibilities of survival, then there's also a slight possibility that this alien invasion has mind control and they just kill people and make them walk to their deaths. So a lack of logical reasoning, a lack of need to engage with the systematic disadvantages that our race has will be the first reason why we cannot win this war. But we took it further, because if they cannot win this war, then they don't accrue all their benefits. Right? We don't think that they could reach there. But even if they could, even if we could fight off this race, even if we could get rid of them from our human planet, we still told you why it was harmful. In that process, the lack of oil, the lack of money, the usage of everything you've ever had to fight off an alien species instead of protecting everybody that you could, with the lack of ability to feed everyone, because everyone's hungry and they're all in this stampede to get the last few amounts of food and resources that we've already had. The animosity and possible anarchy, because everyone just hates each other and has to steal to survive, because in that point in time, everyone just exploited the situation and used it to live their possible last few days to their best. So many people die, many are in trauma. We didn't hear reasoning as to why this is salvageable. We didn't hear reasoning as to why it's possible to reconstruct this. And lastly, we didn't hear reasoning as to why this in any way is a dignified way to survive as humans. For the dignity that opposition wanted to stand for, I don't think it's dignified to let every single person live on this planet knowing that they could have saved their parents, but they didn't. What happens with conformity? We will be at the mercy of the morals of aliens. I told you firstly, this possibly could not be bad. If their constitution values the minimization of pain, if they have order within their planet, they might recognize the same pain that we have. We might not communicate with animals, we might not communicate with other sentient species within our planets, but we still protect them as human beings because we feel guilt, because we feel pain, because we want to continue another day looking ourselves in the eye and thinking that we are really the superior species we paint ourselves to be. We might be treated fairly, we might be discriminated under certain circumstances, but that slight possibility is also an existence under our paradigm. But what happens even if it's in a subpar life, right? Because we couldn't guarantee a meaningful one. And this is where we think the thing about humans is that we find meaning in human interaction and contact. We don't kill the poor, even if the majority of them were tricked by the rich. We don't kill people with cystic fibrosis or muscular dystrophy, even if they have a limited age range and a limited ability to enjoy all the wonders of the world. We don't place these expectations on individuals. Even if you go to that planet the same way you're doomed as a person with cystic fibrosis from the point of birth, we think people still have the ability to make the most of what they have there. And we think to the extent of how horrible it was also exaggerated by side opposition. They can't just remove you from the rest of human existence and the rest of humanity, because they would need a bigger planet for that, right? To get rid of all human contact. There will obviously be human contact. There will obviously be people who know each other. They might not be from the same families if they're taken away from their loved ones, but that human contact is what breeds happiness. And at that point of desperation, we would look past all our differences. Whether you're black, whether you're white, whether you're Hispanic, these are individuals that will appreciate each other. They would live together, they would breathe together, they would survive together. If their doom is near, they would also enjoy that in a meaningful manner and die peacefully instead of the anarchy that your side breeds.